I want you to picture two very different maps of the world.
Okay.
On the first map, it's the one we're all used to. You have borders, trade routes, GDP statistics.
The standard stuff.
Right, it's the map politicians and economists use to figure out who has the power. But the sources we're looking at today, they argue there's a second map, a spiritual geography.
Mm-hmm.
And on that map, one specific country is positioned to do something. Well, something no other nation is currently doing.
It's a pretty bold claim. We're looking at a stack of theological essays, sociological data, and, strategy papers that all seem to point to the Philippines.
But not for the reasons you might think.
Not at all. It's not about economic dominance or military might or anything like that.
But here's the catch, and this is the tension that's just, deeply embedded in these readings. The Philippines is currently living in a paradox.
A huge one.
We're talking about a nation that is over 85% Christian. You walk down a street in Manila, and faith is, it's quite literally painted on the public transport. It's everywhere.
It is. But the data shows this massive disconnect between presence and purpose. The Philippines is a Christian nation by demographic. It had the numbers. But these authors argue it hasn't yet become a missional nation by vocation.
And that distinction, that's the core of what we need to unpack today, because usually when we hear the word missions, we think of, like, a specific department in a church.
Or that one hyper-spiritual aunt who moved to the jungle to translate the Bible.
Exactly. It feels niche. It feels like a side hustle.
It's treated as a sidebar to real life. And the radical proposal in this literature is to move missions from the periphery right to the center.
Wow.
To fundamentally reshape the national identity, so that being Filipino doesn't just mean being born in the archipelago, it means being sent.
From activity to identity. That's the phrase that jumped out at me.
Yeah.
It stops being something you do and starts being who you are. So, okay, let's get into the machinery of this argument. The sources start with a really heavy theological pivot.
They do.
The difference between the Tower of Babel and the Call of Abraham.
And this is fascinating because it reframes what a nation is actually for. If you look at the Babel story in Genesis, the motivation for building that tower was very specific.
Right.
The text says they wanted to make a name for ourselves. It was all about consolidation, identity for the sake of glory and security.
Look how big we are. It's the standard metric for any nation state, isn't it? GDP, skyscrapers, Olympic gold medals, it's all inward facing.
Right, it's centripetal, everything pulling inward to the center. But then, immediately after that story, the text just flips to Abraham.
Completely.
God calls him to build a nation, but the mandate is the complete inverse. He says, I will bless you, so that all the families of the earth shall be blessed through you.
So there's a utilitarian function to the blessing. You aren't just blessed to be comfortable.
That is the big takeaway here. Election implies responsibility. In this framework, a nation isn't a bucket meant to hold blessing. It's a pipe.
A conduit.
Exactly. And if you cap the pipe, the water goes stale. If you just hoard the blessing, you actually lose the purpose of the blessing.
So, applying this to the Philippines, the critique in these essays is that celebrating we are the only Christian nation in Asia is actually a Babel mindset.
It is.
It's static. It's just making a name without doing the job.
Precisely. A missional people asks a scarier question, for whom do we exist? And the authors argue that, national identity is never neutral. Every nation serves a god. For the U.S., historically, it might be liberty or wealth. For China, perhaps stability or power. The proposal here is for the Philippines to consciously align its national why with the Missio Dei, the mission of God.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate for a second. That sounds beautiful on paper.
Yeah.
We exist to bless the world. But practically, the Philippines is a developing nation. It has massive internal struggles, corruption, poverty, infrastructure issues. It feels almost presumptuous to say we're here to save the world when there's so much struggle at home.
And that's a valid pushback. And honestly, if the plan was, let's raise billions of dollars to send professional missionaries, it would be impossible. It would.
It would fail.
But that's where the argument pivots to the accidental missionaries. And this is where the sources get really concrete. We aren't talking about funding thousands of new pastors to fly first class. We are talking about the diaspora.
The stats here are just staggering. Over 10 million Filipinos living and working abroad. That is one of the largest migrations in human history.
It is massive.
Yeah.
And typically, how does the government or even the average family frame this phenomenon?
Oh, it's economic survival. It's brain drain. It's the tragedy of mothers leaving their kids to work as nannies in Hong Kong or Dubai just to pay the bills.
It's a narrative of loss.
Yeah, or at best, a necessary evil to keep the economy afloat with remittances.
And the source material, it acknowledges the pain. It doesn't gloss over the social cost, but it flips the lens. It asks, what if this isn't just economic necessity? What if it's providence?
That's a heavy word. You're saying God orchestrated the global economy just to scatter the people.
Well, the comparison the text makes is to the book of Acts, chapter 8. The early church was persecuted and scattered. It was a tragedy. But the text says, those who were scattered preached the word wherever they went.
Okay.
Or look at the Jewish exile, Daniel in Babylon, Esther in Persia. They weren't there on a mission trip. They were there to work. They were there because they had to be.
They were embedded.
Embedded is the perfect word. The sources call them accidental missionaries. Think about the access a Filipino domestic worker has in the Middle East versus a traditional missionary.
Well, she's inside the house.
She's inside the home of a family that might never let a Christian missionary with a tie and a Bible through the front door, but she's there, cooking their meals, caring for their children, living in the rhythm of their private lives.
Right.
She has access that a theologian could only dream of.
There was that case study in the notes about Maria, the nurse in the Middle East. It struck me because she wasn't, standing on a street corner handing out tracts.
No, and that's the point. If she did that, she'd be deported. Maria lives in a shared apartment complex. Her ministry is cooking adobo and inviting her coworkers over Hindus, Muslims, secularists.
That's it.
In that context, hospitality is the strategy. She isn't debating theology. She is creating a safe space in a lonely city.
It reminds me of the story of Marco in New York City. The text mentioned he works these brutal 12-hour shifts in the ER.
Right. And in a high-stress, high-burnout environment like an NYC hospital, resilience stands out. His colleagues are snapping, burning out. They're cynical. But Marco maintains this steady, cheerful diligence. He prays for his patients while changing IVs. Eventually, people ask, what is with you? Why aren't you angry like the rest of us?
And that's witness as presence. It challenges the Western idea that missions means standing on a stage with a microphone or organizing some big crusade.
It completely democratizes it. The argument is that the infrastructure for global missions, the network, it's already built. It's the 10 million people already there. The problem isn't lack of bodies, it's lack of vision. If those 10 million saw themselves not just as employees, but as sent ones, you change the spiritual temperature of the planet overnight.
But does this work for everyone? I mean, is there something specific about Filipino migrants? Because there are migrants from everywhere. You have the Indian diaspora, the Chinese diaspora.
Sure.
What makes this specific diaspora different according to these sources?
This is where we get into the cultural DNA section of the deep dive. The authors argue that Filipino cultural values aren't just social quirks. They are what they call theological assets.
Okay. They listed a few. Hospitality was a big one. But isn't everyone hospitable? I mean, Southern hospitality is a thing in the U.S.
Sure, but the text argues there is a qualitative difference. Filipino hospitality is often this radical gospel openness. In the West, specifically, there's an epidemic of loneliness. People live in silos.
Yeah.
The Filipino instinct to open the door, to feed you, even if there's very little food in the pot, that disarms people. It bypasses intellectual defenses.
It's hard to argue with someone who just fed you.
It creates a relational bridge before a theological one. It just softens the soil. But then you have concepts like Bayanihan and Kapwa.
I want to make sure I get these definitions right for listeners who aren't familiar. Bayanihan is the community spirit, right? The classic image is the whole village lifting up a nipa hut to move it.
Yes, literal burden bearing. It's the idea that your problem is my problem. And Kapwa is even deeper. It's a recognition of shared identity. I am not a self-made man. I am connected to you.
Okay.
The source argues that Western individualism, this idea that I am an island, is actually the biggest barrier to the gospel in the modern world.
We're too obsessed with me, my rights, my space, my truth.
Right. So when a Filipino brings Kapwa into a hyper-individualized office in London or a lonely apartment block in Tokyo, it's completely countercultural. It models a biblical truth that we are made for relationship. It shows people a connection they are starving for.
There was one trait, though, that felt a bit harder to swallow: resilience. The text frames suffering as a skill set. That feels complicated.
It is. It's the theology of suffering. And you have to tread carefully here. We aren't saying suffering is good, but the Philippines sits on the ring of fire.
Right.
Typhoons, earthquakes, political instability, poverty. The argument is that this history of hardship has forged a kind of spiritual endurance.
It's like a spiritual callus.
In a good way. Missions is hard. Crossing cultures is traumatic. The source argues that a believer from a wealthy, comfortable nation often quits when things get tough. If the AC breaks or the visa gets delayed, they crumble. But a Filipino who has learned to praise God through a typhoon, they're uniquely equipped to go to the hard places. They have suffering long built into their DNA.
That completely redefines the poverty narrative. Instead of, we are poor, so we are weak, it's, we have endured, so we are strong.
It turns the disadvantage into a strategic advantage. It's judo, using the weight of the struggle to flip the whole narrative.
Okay, so we have the theology, the Abrahamic blessing, we have the people, the diaspora, and we have the tools, the cultural DNA. But here's the trillion-dollar question. How do you actually get an entire nation to believe this?
Yeah.
Because right now, if I ask a kid in Cebu what they want to be, they'll say TikTok star or engineer, not missional agent.
You can't just preach it from the pulpit on Sundays. The strategy section of these documents is really aggressive about catechizing the culture.
Which means changing the stories we tell.
Yes. Media as the modern pulpit.
Yeah.
Think about who gets the magazine covers in Manila, or anywhere, really. Actors, politicians, beauty queens.
The usual suspects.
The source suggests a conscious shift to elevate the accidental missionary as the national hero.
So instead of a biopic about a general, you make a Netflix series about the nanny in Hong Kong who started a church in her living room.
Exactly. You shape the aspiration. If you honor sacrifice, you get more sacrifice. If you only honor wealth, you just get greed. You have to change the scoreboard.
And this goes into education, too. I was interested in the idea of integrating this into the school curriculum and not just in Christian living class.
Right. This isn't about more Bible study. It's about history and social studies. Imagine teaching Filipino history not just as a series of colonizations.
We were conquered by Spain, then the U.S., then Japan.
Right. But as a preparation for global influence.
Yeah.
Framing the history of the nation as a training ground.
That's a massive psychological shift. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of history and start seeing yourself as an actor in history.
And you tell the student, you want to be an engineer? Great, be a world-class engineer. But know that your engineering degree is your visa. It's your platform to enter a community and bless it.
It creates a leadership pipeline.
Yes. The church's role shifts from running programs inside the building to mentoring everyday people for global impact outside the building. It's moving from short-term thinking, the one-week mission trip, to generational thinking. How do we raise a generation where this is just normal?
But this requires the government to play ball, doesn't it? Section 5 talks about collaboration. In the U.S., we have a very strict separation of church and state. How does that work in this model?
The sources are careful here. They aren't calling for a theocracy. They know that gets messy and dangerous.
Of course.
They're calling for cooperative separation. The state provides the hardware. The church provides the software.
Give me an example of what that looks like in the real world.
Disaster relief is the easiest one. When a typhoon hits, the government has the C-130 planes, the trucks, the heavy logistics. They can clear the roads.
Sure.
But the government is terrible at long-term trauma care. They can drop the food, but they leave.
And the church stays?
The church is the boots on the ground. They provide the counseling, the community rebuilding, the values. The proposal is to formalize this, acknowledging that the state needs the church's moral capital and volunteer base to actually build a healthy society.
It's avoiding the two extremes. The church trying to run the government, or the church retreating entirely into a holy huddle and ignoring society.
It's a partnership for the common good. And for the diaspora, it means the government doing a better job of protecting these workers, providing legal aid, rights protection, while the church provides the spiritual training before they leave.
So the government ensures they are safe, and the church ensures they are sent.
That's the ideal synergy.
It really is a total overhaul of the national engine. As I was reading through all this, I kept thinking about the listener who isn't Filipino. Why does this matter to someone in London or Nashville or Lagos?
I think it matters because the Western model of missions wealthy nations sending experts to poor nations is dying. It's becoming less feasible politically and financially. The Philippines is a prototype for the future of global Christianity. It's polycentric missions, from everywhere to everywhere.
So if this experiment works in the Philippines, it becomes a blueprint for Brazil, for Nigeria, for South Korea.
Exactly. It challenges every believer to look at their own job, their own city, and ask, am I just surviving here or am I sent here? It forces you to rethink your own geography.
You know, there was a question at the very end of the source material that really stuck with me. It's the kind of question that keeps you up at night.
The one about success.
Yeah. It asks, if mission were truly woven into national identity, how would that change what young people aspire to become?
It's profound.
Hmm.
Currently, the definition of success is almost universally accumulation. Accumulate money, comfort, status. That's the global standard.
The American dream, exported to the world.
But if the national definition of success became distribution, how much blessing did you pass on? It changes everything. It changes how you study. It changes how you treat your employees. It changes why you leave the country.
It turns the whole world into a field of opportunity, but not for extraction, for impact.
And that is a vision that can actually sustain a nation. A Christian nation is just a label. It's like a brand sticker. A missional nation is a movement.
From Babel to blessing. From accidental missionaries to a national vocation. It is a massive idea, but looking at the map, that spiritual geography we talked about, it feels like the Philippines is the only one who can pull it off right now.
They have the numbers, they have the faith, and they have the passports. They just need the shift in identity.
Well, that is a lot to chew on. We hope this deep dive sparks some dangerous questions in your own mind about who you are and what you're specifically designed to do.
Thanks for listening.
We'll catch you on the next one.